The diplomatic summit on Terra Station 7 was supposed to be a simple formality. 300 species had gathered in the Grand Assembly Hall, a massive structure that floated in the void between galaxies, designed specifically for moments like this. The Jatheri Empire, one of the oldest and most powerful civilizations in the known universe, was seeking entry into the Galactic Coalition. Their queen, HFY, had traveled across half the galaxy to stand before the Council and make her case. Marcus Webb sat in the back row of the human delegation, bored out of his mind. He was nobody important, just a junior cultural liaison who got dragged along because his boss had caught the Andromeda flu at the last minute. He'd spent most of the 3-day summit playing games on his datapad and trying to stay awake during speeches that seemed to drone on forever. The assembly hall was intimidating even as someone as jaded as Marcus. The ceiling stretched up so high it disappeared into artificial clouds. Holographic displays floated everywhere, translating speeches into thousands of languages simultaneously. Representatives from across the galaxy sat in carefully arranged sections, each species grouped according to their atmospheric requirements. The methane breathers occupied sealed pods on the left. The silicon-based life forms had their own temperature-controlled zone, and the humans shared space with other oxygen-breathing species in the center sections. Queen HFY stood on the central platform, and Marcus had to admit she was impressive. The Jatheri were insectoid, standing nearly 8 feet tall on 6 legs, with chitinous armor that shimmered between deep purple and midnight blue. Her mandibles clicked softly as she spoke, a sound that the translators rendered into smooth, formal speech. She had been presenting for almost 2 hours now, explaining why the Jatheri deserved a place among the Coalition's elite. Marcus hadn't been paying much attention until something changed in the room. He felt it before he understood it, a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The polite attention that delegates had been showing suddenly felt forced. Whispers started spreading through the different sections. On the platform, Queen HFY faltered mid-sentence. Her antennae, which had been held high and proud, drooped slightly. She recovered and continued speaking, but Marcus could see the strain now. Something was very wrong. He leaned toward Jennifer Park, the senior diplomat sitting next to him. "What's happening?" Jennifer didn't take her eyes off the platform. "Check the cultural database. The Jatheri section." Marcus pulled up the file on his datapad, scrolling quickly. His stomach dropped as he found the entry. 3 days ago, while Queen HFY was in transit to the summit, a mining dispute on the border between Jatheri space and the Krell Confederacy had turned violent. A Jatheri military commander had ordered the destruction of a Krell survey ship. 43 crew members had died. The news had spread through the summit like wildfire, but apparently nobody had bothered to tell the Queen. She had arrived, prepared her speech, and walked into the assembly hall with no idea that half the delegations now viewed her species as reckless aggressors. Did anyone inform her? Marcus asked quietly. The Temporal Council made the decision to let her proceed, Jennifer whispered back. They thought she should have the chance to make her case before addressing the incident. That's insane. She's walking into an ambush. Jennifer shot him a warning look. Keep your voice down. This isn't our business. The humans aren't involved in the border dispute. On the platform, Queen HFY continued her speech, but the situation was deteriorating rapidly. The Krell delegation, a group of reptilian beings with rough, scaled skin, had started making clicking sounds, their species' equivalent of booing. Other delegations were joining in with their own expressions of disapproval. The Queen's voice grew stronger, more desperate. She was talking about peace, about cooperation, about the Jatheri commitment to galactic harmony. But Marcus could see she didn't understand why her words were landing wrong. Her antennae were trembling now, and her lower legs had begun to shake. A voice boomed across the hall. Counselor Vextor of the Krell had risen from his seat. The Jatheri speak of peace, while their warriors murder innocent explorers. What kind of empire sends its queen to beg for alliance while its soldiers commit acts of war? The accusation hit Queen HFY like a physical blow. Her entire body went rigid. Her mandibles opened and closed silently, no words coming out. The translator feed went dead for several seconds. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I don't understand. What incident? What are you talking about? The hall erupted. Dozens of species began talking at once, some accusing, others expressing disbelief that the Queen didn't know about her own military's actions. The holographic displays flickered wildly, trying to keep up with the simultaneous translations. Marcus watched in growing horror as the Queen began to physically collapse. Her legs were buckling, her whole body tilting to the left. In Jatheri culture, he remembered reading, a physical fall in public was the ultimate humiliation. It meant complete loss of status, a failure so profound that the individual could never recover their standing. If she went down in front of 300 species, her empire would be disgraced. The Jatheri might never gain admission to the coalition. Political consequences could ripple for generations. The other human delegates sat frozen, following protocol. This wasn't humanity's problem. The humans had carefully maintained neutrality in the border disputes. Getting involved now would be a diplomatic disaster. Marcus looked at Jennifer. Someone has to help her. Stay in your seat, Jennifer hissed. That's an order. But Marcus was already moving. He didn't know what made him do it. Maybe it was the unfairness of watching someone ambushed with information they had no way of knowing. Maybe it was the memory of his own worst moment, standing in front of his university ethics committee, accused of plagiarism because of citation error, feeling the whole world turn against him for a mistake he didn't even know he'd made. Maybe he was just too stupid to understand the consequences. He pushed past Jennifer's grasping hand and walked down the aisle toward the central platform. The hall was massive, and it felt like it took forever to reach the raised stage. Every eye in the room tracked his movement. The angry chatter died down, replaced by confused silence. Queen Lara was still standing, barely. Her legs trembled violently, and she had begun listing further to the left. She was maybe 5 seconds from complete collapse. Her compound eyes didn't seem to focus on anything. She was drowning in the sudden revelation, in the understanding that she had unknowingly led her people into a diplomatic catastrophe. Marcus reached the steps of the platform and climbed up. He had no plan, no idea what he was going to say. He just knew he couldn't watch this happen. He stepped up beside the Queen, positioning himself on her left side. Then, as naturally as if they were old friends meeting on a street corner, he leaned against her, providing support. The Queen's chitinous armor was surprisingly warm against his shoulder. "I've got you," Marcus said quietly, knowing the translator would pick it up. "Just breathe. We'll figure this out." The Queen's antennae twitched toward him. Her whole body was shaking, but she wasn't falling anymore. Marcus took more of her weight, adjusting his stance to keep them both upright. The assembly hall was dead silent now. 300 species watched a junior human diplomat prop up an alien queen who was moments from collapse. Marcus looked out at the sea of faces, at the shocked expressions, the confused whispers starting to spread again. His heart was pounding so hard he thought it might break through his chest. He'd just committed about 17 different protocol violations. His career was probably over, but he couldn't bring himself to regret it. He turned slightly to look up at Queen Lara. Her compound eyes focused on him, and he saw something there that transcended species. Gratitude, certainly, but also a desperate question. "You didn't know," Marcus said, loud enough for the hall to hear. "Nobody told you about the incident. You came here in good faith, prepared to speak about peace, while your military was taking actions you hadn't authorized. That's not the Queen's failure. That's a failure of communication." Counselor Vextor stood again. "The human has no authority to speak here. This is a matter between the Krell and the Jatheri." "You're right," Marcus agreed, his voice somehow steady even though his hands were shaking. "I'm nobody. I'm a junior liaison who probably shouldn't even be in this room. But I'm also someone who believes in basic fairness. You all sat here and watched Queen Lara give a speech about peace while knowing that her words would be turned against her because of an incident she knew nothing about. That's not justice. That's a setup. Another voice rang out, this one belonging to a delegate from the crystalline species that lived in the ice nebulas. Why should we believe the Queen wasn't informed? She is the leader of her people. Queen S.H. Laura's mandibles moved, and her voice came out hoarse but clear, because I was in faster-than-light travel for 6 days. My communication systems were down for the final 3 days due to a solar storm in the Kepler belt. When I arrived at the station yesterday, I went immediately into isolation to prepare my speech, as is traditional for my people. I had no contact with my advisors. I had no idea. The explanation rang true, and Marcus could see it landing with at least some of the delegates. But plenty still looked skeptical, and the Krell delegation was openly hostile. This changes nothing, Vextor insisted. Her people committed an act of war. The Jatheri cannot be trusted. Marcus felt the Queen starting to shake again. The weight of it was crushing her. He made a decision that was probably going to get him exiled from Earth. Then, let her make it right, Marcus said. Give her the chance to address what happened, to take responsibility, to find justice for the Krell crew. She came here to talk about peace. Let her prove that she means it. The murmuring in the hall grew louder. Some species were nodding, others were clearly opposed. The decision would fall to the Temporal Council, the rotating leadership that managed coalition business. High Counselor Talazir, an ancient being whose species had been founding members of the coalition, rose slowly from the council platform. His species looked almost like living shadows, their forms constantly shifting and difficult to focus on. The human raises an interesting point, Talazir said, his voice carrying a weight that silenced the room. Queen S.H. Lara, do you wish to address this incident? The Queen straightened, though Marcus could feel her still leaning on him for support. I do, High Counselor, but I must request a short recess to consult with my advisors and learn the full details of what occurred. Denied, Vextor snapped. We've waited long enough for Jatheri accountability. Marcus felt anger flash through him. She just learned about this 5 minutes ago. How is she supposed to address something when she doesn't even know what happened? Marcus, Jennifer's voice came from behind him, sharp and commanding. She had approached the platform during the exchange. Stand down. Now. He turned to see Jennifer climbing the steps, along with Ambassador Keiko Tanaka, the head of the human delegation. Both looked furious, but Ambassador Tanaka's anger seemed directed at the hall rather than at Marcus. If I may, Tanaka said, addressing the council directly. The human delegation requests a 30-minute recess to allow Queen S.H. Lara to consult with her staff and gather information about the border incident. This is a reasonable request and follows established protocol for situations where new information affects proceedings. High Counselor Talazir considered this. The request is reasonable. However, given the circumstances, we will grant only 20 minutes. The Queen will then have the opportunity to address the Assembly regarding the incident. If her response is unsatisfactory, the Temporal Council will vote on whether to permanently bar the Jatheri from coalition membership. The gavel came down, a sound that echoed through the massive hall. Delegates began standing and moving toward the exits for the recess. Marcus suddenly found himself surrounded by human security, being quickly escorted off the platform. As they hustled him away, he looked back and saw Queen Sishlara still standing where he'd left her. Her antennae had lifted again, and she was surrounded by her own advisors who had rushed forward the moment the recess was called. Just before he was pulled through the door, he saw her turn and look at him. He couldn't read Jatheri expressions, but he thought maybe she was trying to say thank you. The human delegation had a private conference room on the station, a sterile white space with windows looking out into the void. Marcus stood in the center of it, feeling like a prisoner waiting for execution. Ambassador Tanaka paced in front of him while Jennifer and 3 other senior diplomats sat at the conference table, all wearing expressions ranging from anger to disbelief. Do you have any idea what you've just done? Tanaka asked, her voice controlled but seething underneath. You've inserted humanity into a border dispute between 2 militaristic species. You violated every protocol we have about maintaining neutrality in regional conflicts. And you've personally humiliated the Krell delegation by suggesting they were somehow being unfair. Marcus kept his eyes forward. I understand, Ambassador, but the Queen was going to fall. So let her fall. Jennifer burst out. Marcus, this isn't about one person. This is about galactic politics. The Jatheri have been aggressive expansionists for decades. Maybe they don't belong in the coalition. Maybe the Krell were right to call them out. They called her out about something she didn't know about. Marcus replied. That's not justice. That's a trap. Tanaka stopped pacing and faced him directly. And what happens now? The Krell are already filing formal complaints against the human delegation. 3 other species have suggested that humans are too emotional and immature to participate in coalition politics. There are whispers that we should be placed under observation status, which would mean losing voting rights for the next decade. The weight of that settled on Marcus like a physical thing. He'd known there would be consequences, but hearing them laid out made it real. Humanity had only been part of the Galactic Coalition for 47 years. They were still proving themselves, still fighting against the perception that they were primitive newcomers who didn't understand how things worked. I'm sorry, Marcus said quietly. I'll resign. I'll take full responsibility. Tell them I acted alone, against orders, and that I've been removed from the diplomatic corps. Tanaka studied him for a long moment. You will resign. That's already decided. But it won't be enough. The damage is done.